what we need to help people understand is that the changes we need to make to address both of these enormous challenges and others that you've mentioned, like the biodiversity crisis, all of that stuff makes for a better world. This is not about sacrifice and deprivation. This is a story of human flourishing in a post-fossil fuel world, in a smarter, better, more connected world. It's a more just and equitable world. It's a physically healthier world for all of us as well as the planet as a whole. And so we have to paint the picture of that better world. It's not about somebody coming to take away your hamburger or your gas stove. It's about sending less kids to the hospital with asthma and healthier, more walkable bodies and communities. It's about everything that we want and need.
Welcome to Distilled, brought to you by KTM. I am Will Sarney, your host, founder and CEO of Water Foundry, and founder and general partner of Water Foundry Ventures. During each episode, I will speak to global water leaders solving wicked water problems. We'll talk about their career, perspective on what's going on in the world of water, and what they see for the future. Today, our guest is Susan Joy Hassel, Director of ClimateCommunication.org. Susan, I've seen your videos. I'm really excited to talk to you about what you've done historically in the world of climate change and how you're seeing all those lessons learned and some of the key issues translate into the world of water, which is, predominantly the world that I sit in. So really thrilled to have you here and having a really interesting conversation about, the origin, how you got hooked on climate change. Maybe that's the right word. Where you see the dialogue going and obviously the intersection in the world of water.
Yeah, climate and water are so intimately connected, as you know. How I got hooked. I seem to have a knack for absorbing large amounts of complex information and translating them into something simple, something that's clear, concise, and compelling. And so back in my 20s, it was a very long time ago, I was working in the energy arena, and it became very clear to me very quickly that the main impact of our energy use and our energy system was climate change. And back then, this is 35 plus years ago, people were not really talking a lot about climate change. It was starting to be talked about more in the scientific community, but it wasn't the kind of societal issue that it is now. But it became very clear to me that it was going to be the issue of our time. So I really determined at that point to dedicate the rest of my life to doing this thing that I do well, taking lots of complex information and making it clear and compelling and direct it on climate change. So I was the first person to put the two words climate and communication together, which is why my website is climatecommunication.org. And, that's my thing. That's what I've always been doing. I'm fascinated by the language that we use, the way scientists speak to each other, to the public, to policymakers, to journalists, what's understood and what's not, what's really badly misunderstood. I'm also really fascinated by the ideological components of how we use language and how that affects everything with regard to climate change and how we address it.
I know your point of view on that one, and we'll come back to it, Susan. It's really interesting that you, more than interesting, for me, I see it as really a critical issue, both in the world of climate and the world of water. And I push back pretty hard on using the word drought, for example. And my view is, if I put myself in the position of the layperson and I hear the word drought, I assume that if it rains, life is good, and I don't need to rip out my lawn. I don't need to do things that might take a little bit of work. And, we sort of struggle with that. It's, the media loves the word drought, mega drought, super drought, and focuses on technology solutions that are really not the best approach going forward. Like we always fall to desal. So I love that you challenge the narrative around climate change and have the ability to bridge that gap between the scientific community and the layperson, how we might talk if we didn't have a technical background.
You bring up a great example, the term drought. So there are some similarities between the way we use the term drought and the way we use the term climate change. Climate change, the way scientists use it, is any change in Earth's climate at any time in Earth's history for any reason. So it's a very generic term. And I think it's similar with drought. What we're looking at now is not climate change, or it is climate change, but it's something much more. It is human-caused climate disruption. Similarly, what we're having now in terms of drought is what the scientists call aridification, but that's not a very common public word. I want to explain what that means to people. I say this is now human-caused climate disruption affecting drought in a way that we're changing drought, and it is something different than it's been before. It's much more of a long-term human-induced problem.
This is going to sound like a consulting engagement, but I'm going to ask you anyway, and feel free to send me an invoice on this, but I'm fascinated by this. And I use the word aridification, and then usually in parentheses, I'll say, mega drought or whatever it may be. And I know aridification is such a clumsy word and, not something that the layperson would necessarily get. So, what's your thinking on what's a better word for drought and aridification? I mean, is there anything learned from the climate world that you can pitch to folks like me?
So usually I will say a word like that, we just can't use it. In this case, I actually feel differently. I actually feel like we should use it and we should explain it every time, break it down. Aridification, arid. People know what arid means.
Right.
We are making things more arid, and we can explain why. Warmer atmosphere is going to absorb more moisture from the soils and it's going to dry things out. We can explain how climate change is affecting atmospheric circulation patterns like the Hadley cell, which is, we're not going to get into that with the layperson, but we can explain how we are expanding deserts. We're expanding dry places into places that have not been traditionally that dry. So we are aridifying. We are making things drier. So to me, once you explain that, then I think you can use that word in that same context. So it's really a good word once it's explained and understood. So you can't just drop it in. But so there's not a simple substitute for it, I'm afraid.
Okay, well, that's good. So basically, unpack it, explain it, connect it to language that people understand. I think you've done an outstanding job in terms of, really focusing on how to take something as, vague as climate change and making it approachable. How do we change the media? The reporters that are out there that say, you took a deep breath there. I'm quite sure that there's going to be stories behind this.
It's very important to what you're saying, because scientists focus on the reports that we produce, right? The IPCC reports and the national climate assessments and all of these things, and we should focus on them. However, the average person and the policymakers are not reading those reports. What they're getting from those reports is what they get from the media. We have to talk to the media because they have the megaphone, right? So how do we improve that? I have dedicated the last at least 5 years of my life almost entirely to that. I've worked with colleagues of mine to help train journalists, to give them much more background and information about climate change so that they can report on it in a more helpful way. I also produce certain products directed exactly at journalists. So I produce a series of quick facts, and the longer name is Quick Facts for Any Story. One of them is on heat waves and climate change. One of them is on heavy downpours and flooding and climate change, hurricanes and climate change, drought and climate change. And in the first sentence, we talk about this aridification issue. And so there are 9 of them. Reporters do not have time to do the deep dive. They don't have time to read the literature, and in most cases, they don't have the ability to read the scientific literature, understand it, figure out what matters. So I have done that work with my colleagues at SciLine, which is a product of the American Association of the Advancement of Science. And we have created, these are very simple, clear, we've honed the literature, and we've put it together in simple, plain language with a top-line message. So if they have room for one sentence in a story about a current heat wave, we give them that sentence about how heat waves have changed because of climate change. And we give them all the literature, we give them the background, the citations, and we give them some scientists that they can contact for quotes who we vetted as not only being top in their field in science, but being able to communicate clearly with journalists. So this is one of the ways that I'm trying to help journalists. I know when they're on deadline, they don't have time to do the deep dive, but they need this information. What's hard is that they don't all know about this and they don't all go and use it. And that's the ways that I've tried to help. I've also produced, I've done lots of workshops for journalists. When the pandemic happened, we created a climate reporting masterclass online because we couldn't gather together in the same room together. So I'm really working on this. I also write a lot of op-eds trying to go direct to the public instead of having to go through the mediator of a journalist. There are some excellent journalists working in this space, but there are also a lot of general assignment reporters that they just don't have the background.
Yeah, we see the same thing in the world of water. And I would say over the past, 2 years, in particular, the last year, there's just been a lot of media attention on water, certainly what's going on in the American West and how it's impacting economic development, challenging the agricultural sector and so on. And I really do appreciate that, journalists have no time. I always offer to send content and it's like, thank you, but they can't wade through it. But I like what you're doing here in terms of creating packets of content that are readily digestible, that they can access. Now, of course, now that you're a guest on Distilled, the journalists out there will know more about what you're offering. So, and I make a little bit of a joke about it, but I'm hopeful that more people know about the content that you created and can use it as a way for us to connect better with the layperson, because I think that's the only way we're going to solve climate challenges and water challenges and the collapse of biodiversity, all the sort of daunting issues of our time. Susan, where do you see this all going in terms of a few things? Your world with respect to climate change and communication and engagement with, the various stakeholder groups, and also at the intersection of climate and water. And, there's in my world, there's a lot of discussion that, the climate community has done a much better job in communicating, believe it or not, than the water sector. So should we, in quotes, hitch our wagon to, the attention being paid to climate change and also the amount of money that's flowing into climate tech? So yeah, I'm interested in your take. What are you seeing? I mean, do you buy those data points that I see? And
I think it's interesting. I think there are a lot of problems still with the way we're communicating about climate change, which we can get into, but there's certainly huge overlap between water, energy, and climate. Just yesterday, I was reading about these, the mega fracking projects and how much water. Right. Not only are they having drilled for the oil or the gas, they're drilling for water to feed the oil and the gas fracking. And these are depleted, stressed aquifers already, and nobody's really talking about that very much. So, and then Go
Yeah,
ahead.
that was a New York Times story. It was well done, and and I actually just posted on it this morning that it's like, why are we surprised? Like, I'm stunned. Like, really? This is a aha moment? I don't get it.
Most people just don't know these things. We have to have, and this is a media thing, right? We've got to get these stories out. But the New York Times has a climate desk, as does NPR and the Washington Post and the LA Times, and so some of the big ones are really doing a great job. But who's reading that, right? Are people even reading more? People are just clicking on the stories that they want to read, and this kind of stuff is pretty depressing. But people do need to understand that climate change is a water issue, that it means too much water in some places and times and too little water in other places and times, and that there's so much that we can do, not only to reduce climate change, which we must do, but also to increase our resilience to the impacts that are already here and are on the way with other investments in technology and water policy and all the other things that you know so well. And we know what works. It's not like we have to invent something new. There are policies and technologies that work, and we need to
Right.
use them. We need to deploy them, and we have to help people understand them and understand what's needed.
I very firmly believe there's an opportunity to connect in a very positive, constructive way the climate narrative and the water narrative without, just, um, hitching our wagon to the climate, movement narrative. And again, let's have a follow-up conversation, but water is a very visceral thing. I mean, that gallon liter of water people relate to. And if that can be leveraged into the climate narrative and make that more immediate and more real in the scheme of things, then I think that would be an interesting play. And I know everyone sort of kind of touches on that, but I think there's more to be done.
Well, absolutely. But what I would like to change about the narrative is that it's not about what we have to give up. It's about what we have to gain, right? So I'm not being Pollyanna here. The story is the worry and the hope, the threat and the opportunity. And that's true in climate and water, right? So we can't just it's not a Pollyanna story, right? These things are real threats, serious, and they're not in the future anymore. They have moved firmly into our present. But what we need to help people understand is that the changes we need to make to address both of these enormous challenges and others that you've mentioned, like the biodiversity crisis, all of that stuff makes for a better world. This is not about sacrifice and deprivation. This is a story of human flourishing in a post-fossil fuel world, in a smarter, better, more connected world. It's a more just and equitable world. It's a physically healthier world for all of us, as well as the planet as a whole. And so we have to paint the picture of that better world. It's not about somebody coming to take away your hamburger or your gas stove. It's about sending less kids to the hospital with asthma and healthier, more walkable bodies and communities. It's about everything that we want and need.
That narrative around optimism and, what is possible and, opportunities, I believe is absolutely critical in all of this. And the work I do on the water strategy side, when I talk to, multinationals, I provide context on the risks, but I talk mostly about the opportunities. And I learned that is much more powerful and much more of a hook to get the C-suite engaged.
Different things for different people, but I think you're right for the business sector. That's really the case. What I don't know if I would even call myself optimistic, though, because optimistic implies that I think it's going to happen. So what I think I have is constructive hope. And I also have constructive doubt. So I know the constructive hope is I know it can be done. We know what works. We have the policies. We have the technologies. We can do this. That's where my hope comes from because I see it being done. And in the places where it's being done, it's working. So that's the constructive hope. The constructive doubt is, are we going to get smart enough, fast enough to do what's needed, to override the power of the fossil fuel industry, to change the politics enough to get where we need in time?
Okay, I'm going to pivot a little bit, Susan.
Okay.
So, constructive doubt. You were born in Brooklyn and grew up in New York.
It's true.
Well, I was born in Brooklyn and raised in Queens, and I sort of put the constructive doubt piece as part of the New York state of mind a bit. Like it's very much a can-do attitude. However, there's that.
It's definitely a skeptical attitude. And, good scientists, good engineers are skeptical, right? You have to ask, you have to keep questioning. So we want to make sure.
I agree with you. I frame myself as an optimist, but, there's sort of a heavy dose of, let's say, doubt, but skepticism at times, and it becomes a little daunting. But I can't imagine not doing what we do. I mean, it's just, a friend of mine said a long time ago when I explained to her what I did, she said, "Oh, you live in the solution." And I like that. It's like, sure, I can get up every day and tackle, issues like this. And I don't know you well, but I'm willing to bet you're in that category based on, you spending your entire career, not just, in the sort of mainstream climate world, but focusing on a really interesting lever to pull that's powerful.
Yeah. And, we also know that emotions are not simple levers that we can pull, right? We can't just say, okay, we're going to scare people and then they're going to, because, that can really backfire. People can get so scared that they are paralyzed. They want to pull the covers over their head, or they want to get a bigger SUV to protect themselves or something, or they build a bunker. So we have to be careful, but there is something to be worried about. And if you're not worried about climate, you are not paying attention and you don't understand. So people need to be worried, but I don't want to get them all the way to fear to where they lock up and they can't act. And one of the things we've learned, and to me, this is intuitive, is that anger is actually more powerful in many cases an emotion than anxiety.
Hey, Susan, one last question, actually two. One and another pivot. Are you really going to open up the uncertainty bar for scientists?
It's the error bar.
Oh, the error bar. I can't believe I blew that.
So, I
error bar.
Well, a lot about words that mean something different to scientists than they do to the public, right? So a great example is the word uncertainty, right? Scientists use the term uncertainty to mean like a range of futures, right? They call that the uncertainty range. Well, to the public, uncertainty means we don't know, And similarly, in that same space, scientists will use the term error bars to talk about the uncertainty range around a particular projection. To the public, error just means wrong, right? It's an error. So, but scientists are talking about the error bars. So that's what I always say. When I retire, I'm going to open up a tavern for scientists, and I'm going to call it the error bar.
Okay. Well, if you do open it up, I'll be there, and I will get the name right. So I love that comment, even though I did not remember it correctly. Susan, loved this conversation. Absolutely love it. I so admire what you're doing. I think you're really the crux of, how do we change the world in a positive way? And it's probably just the right dose of anger and optimism and mobilization in the scheme of things. So thank you again.
Sure. It's my pleasure to talk with you. I agree on all of that. what it's a combination of. I am completely convinced that the words matter. So, I hate when people say new normal. I say, no, it's a new abnormal. It's the new abnormal. And they talk about the increase in natural disasters. I say, no, 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 these are unnatural disasters. So I'm constantly trying to change the language because I believe that if we change the words, we can change the world.
I love it. Absolutely love it. Keep doing what you're doing. Well, thanks again. Really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you.